Musica from Tintoretto. Okay.
Oh.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Kitty.
Hi, cool.
Finally, with the help of my son, I can see you.
All right. So try to mute yourself as you come in, and we will get started in just a moment. Mute. Okay. Okay. Hearing some loud background. It's so funny. I was just watching the video from the last session, which never got uploaded, I guess, but I have it. But maybe I didn't upload it because it was so loud. Someone had a TV on in the background for most of it. So I'm hearing a few little bits of background. I think we're good now, but please chat in to the chat box if you are having any sort of issue hearing me or seeing me. So sometimes I can't tell if there's background for some reason. In that last video I watched, it was loud for you guys, but I couldn't tell. So let's get started. We have two very exciting artists today. Tintoretto, who I have to say is my favorite artist of the Renaissance. I can't see out of my glasses. And I'll tell you why. So he was born Jacopo Robusti in Venice, Italy, circa 1518. Tintoretto means little dyer because his father dyed material. So he had experience as a child learning color, which I think is really exciting. He has, from a childhood, learned to grind down pigments and learn how to mix paint and make dyes for the clothing with his father. So Tintoretto literally means little dyer. So he had a really exciting career during the Venetian painting time. He supposedly, so some people say for sure that he studied under Titian, and other people say it's not 100% sure. Of course, when we're looking 500 years back, we don't have all the facts all the time, but it seems that he had a very great career. He also had 8 children and a wife. Sorry, I'm muting someone. There it is. Gotcha. Nope, still someone. So somebody's got a little background noise.
Meeting is being recorded.
Got him. Okay. So I've got to really figure out how to mute you guys. I really can't figure it out. So there's got to be a way to, anyway. So he knows color. He's living in the Renaissance period. He's born in Venice, Italy. He studies under Titian. Like, this is all set up for Renaissance success, right? And that's exactly what happens. He becomes a very big icon of Italy during this time period, painting churches and making commissions all over. A lot of his paintings are directly on the walls, so you can only go to Italy to see them. Last year, there was a huge retrospective of his work in DC, and maybe some of you went to it and you got to see over 200 drawings and some of the largest paintings ever moved from Europe to the US. So a pretty ambitious project and very risky to move really old paintings like that. So they did a great job. I didn't get to see the show, but maybe some of you did, and I'd love to see your pictures or comments. Anyway, so, you know, his contemporaries are, wow. His contemporaries are Da Vinci and Michelangelo, and Varanasi is the next big one that comes in and really is his main contemporary competitor. He's a very competitive man who is known for his loose brushwork. And again, that's something that's just starting to come up from the ashes. You know, they're just starting to move towards more stylistic brushwork, loose brushwork, rather than very flat, smooth looking paintings. But you know, it was a little out of the box at the time. And he was very ambitious. There was a story, well, I'll save that for a little later. So then he, you know, lived his whole life in Italy, in Venice. And so, you know, if you go to Italy, you can really get to see a lot of work of his. Another place I have never been, sadly, but that should be next on my list. So the style is called Mannerism. That's a style from the Renaissance that marks a use of strongly dramatic subjects, depictions of human figures, and exaggerated portions and poses. So there's ways that we think he created these works, using mock-ups, creating sort of like little mock-ups out of clay and figurines that he dressed up and put them hanging from the air to see how they turned and changed in the paintings, the bodies, how they looked flying in the air. Because you can't really take a picture of someone flying in the air and make them a painting of an angel, right? You have to figure out how to make it look like they're flying in the air. All right, our next artist of the day is Neo Rausch. I can't say it, I'm gonna say Rausch the whole day. Quite a handsome man, born in 1960 in Germany. His parents were killed in an accident when he was 4 years old, and then he was raised by his grandparents. He's had a pretty short and quick art career up to the top. In 1980, he started studying art. In 1990, he had something else happen, some other big recognition, like he got his first big show, and then in 2000 he had his first large solo retrospective. So maybe he had his first solo show, then his retrospective. So that's in a period of 20 years. He's just like boom, or 30 years, boom, 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 straight to the top. He's selling his paintings before he even makes them. He has solo show after solo show after solo show. I saw one in 2014 at David's Werner, and that there's a guy who rides around on bikes. His name's James, and he videotapes all the art shows in New York City. So I often post those on the website. He is known as one of the greatest painters of our time. That's always up for debate. Everyone has their own opinion, but his work is very much relatable to Tintoretto. Let's take a look at why. So both of these artists are using fantastical characters or mythological or characters from the Bible to depict excuse me, to depict these very filled paintings with many characters doing many things in separate places. So there's not just one narrative, there's multiple narratives happening in a story, which also all combine to one painting. So there's some things that you can see, knowing that Tintoretto studied under Titian. He may have, this looks sort of like a golden rectangle to me with a division right at the house, and then it divides again right here, and you can see that it sort of spirals back to the arms of this man and then to this figure in the very back. So there's a lot of ways he has divided up this rectangle compositionally. There's also an overlying X. Maybe you see different things where things line up that can be really interesting. There's other ways, and this is called the Miracle of Saint Mark. And what this painting is depicting is Saint Mark. This man is trying to leave the city to go follow God, and then they are trying to punish him by beating him with different tools, but every tool that they go to use breaks. So he's holding up a hammer here. You can see they went to smash him with the hammer, but then the hammer broke. And that is because St. Mark up here is protecting this man because he has devoted himself to God. The patron, the person who bought the painting, is over here in the corner. So often in Renaissance paintings, you'll see the person who bought the painting depicted as one of the figures in the painting. But the story is a religious story depicting the miracle of St. Mark, and therefore we have a lot of things directing us to this figure down here and this figure up here. As the viewer of the painting, we get to see this miracle figure up here, whereas all the other people in the painting do not realize that there is an angel or a saint hovering over. So it's pretty interesting to me that the way that he's depicted this is, as the viewer, we get to experience more than the person in the painting telling the story. You also get a sense of very strong lights and very dark darks. So we have white whites and black blacks. He is a master of drama. In my classes this week, we talked about tone and grayscale. And this is a great example of someone who probably did a black and white underpainting and then put color over it. Whereas this painting here was a sienna underpainting with color over it. Both are techniques from the Renaissance period. That brings me to Neo Rausch, who is using classical techniques in a contemporary world with, he says they're not surrealism, so we are going to respect that idea. They come from his psyche. They are sort of just pouring out of him as he paints. And he's like stream of consciousness. If you're a writer and you're working on stream of consciousness, you just let the pen go. You're journaling, you just journal, whatever pops up, pops up. You try not to judge it. You just are the conduit, basically. Maybe he's channeling like Hilma af Klint. So both of these artists are still using very classical methods to get their point across, their narrative across. Obviously, the technique is pretty exciting. They obviously have massive skill, and they have practiced drawing and tone and composition over and over and over to get to this point where they can draw a figure in any position, turning and twisting and moving. And you notice there's not a lot of stagnant figures in these paintings, is there? They're all moving, they're all doing something, they're all leaning or looking or sharing a moment that we don't really know what it's about. We know in Tintoretto's often what the paintings are about, but in Neo Rausch, I don't know that he even knows what they're about. They're about his subconscious, I guess. And a lot of artists are doing that, and I find it really exciting to sort of just see what flows onto the canvas, but you can only do that after you've practiced drawing figures for 20 years and you understand how to put a figure in a room sitting on a chair or leaning on a table without actually looking at one. So challenge yourself, especially those of you who are in my life drawing class, to see if you can draw some figures without looking at them from any resource, but just from your head, sitting, standing, bending, moving. Okay, so here we're looking at more biblical scenes. We have tied to a post over here, Jesus, and then we also have Mary and baby, and then there's something going on that I find really interesting. The way that you compositionally move through this painting is through this maroon color that he likes to use. We could also say, like in this back example, there's a lot of that same magenta, maroon color. There's also blue and then gold, but those are essentially back to primary colors. They actually are like the printing colors, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So we see this color over and over. This color does represent royalty. The purple is meant to represent loyalty. You can see that Tintoretto ran out of the blue in this man. He didn't quite get finished here. And again, I think this is the patron over here coming in, or over here, but that looks like a pastor. So again, he's given us a way to walk all the way through the painting, coming in through this side of the painting, and we literally, our eye just travels all the way through these people. The robes are all connected. That color goes from connection to connection to connection of the humans through the painting. So something really interesting, how do you help a viewer read your painting and see all parts of it? I was in the Norton Simon Museum the other day, and the guy was giving a tour, and I love him so much because the first thing he said, you know, when we look at a painting, we often just look at the figures and we forget to look at the corners, and we need to look at the corners first. That's what he said, not me. So if you look at the corners, often you're given a little more information. So over here, there's literally symbolism and writing that depicts exactly what the painting is about. If you look in this corner, you see this sneaky little figure coming in. And if you look in this corner, you see an entire landscape painting. And if you look in this corner and travel down, you end up finding another man over here that you may not have seen before. And then you also notice the drapery and the hands. And then maybe you take a moment to look at the hand gestures and how those are creating narrative in the story. So when you read a painting, you want to make sure that your eye is going to direct wherever it directs first, and then you want to let it travel through, and then you want to make sure you check your edges and your corners and see what maybe you missed in that narrative. Neo Rausch brings us in a similar way with a very interesting diagonal, and he also uses yellows and greens to help us get through this painting. Both of these men are not afraid to use their whites and their blacks. You know, I actually have teachers who say you're not allowed to use white or black. Personal preference, not necessary. All right, over here we have the origin of the Milky Way here, and it's a really nice Renaissance painting. Also thinking about the color in these, thinking about 500 years ago, how Tintoretto got that blue as opposed to how Neo Rausch got his blue. Neo Rausch went to Blick and bought a tube of blue or a big container of blue, or he probably had his assistant do it. Tintoretto had to wait for it to come in a shipment from Afghanistan and then grind it up, mix it with his color, and hopefully be able to pay for the color because it was so expensive. It was very hard to pay for these paint pigments. So considering that and what you're dealing with here, the painting in itself is magnificent. The colors are magnificent, but his ability to create figures moving in air is really magical. Again, we want to look at our corners. We have angels in these two bottom corners, and they are lighting torches and shooting arrows, and there's birds, and all of this is to create the Milky Way through the milk of I forget her name. Anyway, this is a mythological or Greek story here. And then as you travel through as well, we see more strong diagonals. Both of these men like to use strong diagonals, which we know creates a lot of movement. And again, we notice there's almost no one just standing around doing nothing. Everyone is in the middle of a moment. We get the feeling that we're stepping into a very strange moment, a very particular moment that these men have depicted for us. Rausch is using contemporary moments, things from 2019 or whatever year he painted this in. He paints so many paintings, it's hard to keep track. He is just pumping them out on the daily, putting up full-on solo shows as well as selling out those shows before they're even up on the wall. People want these paintings, and they're huge, like 20 feet by 10 feet. massive, massive paintings. And same with Tintoretto's. They're just absolutely massive, ambitious paintings. Both of these are really good examples of light and how we use light to change the mood of the painting. What we're looking at is another Greek myth on the left, or a story of, oh shoot, I'm blanking on the story here. If you know the story, please remind me. Oh, but this guy is peeking in on her, and she's a goddess, I believe, and not supposed to be seen nude. And he catches her. You can see the guys back here. So that's a terrible moment for her. That happens a lot in mythological painting stories, doesn't it? They're always being caught nude, bathing. And over here, Neo Rausch's story, I couldn't tell you. You can decide, and I think that's what the point is. Like, he has his narrative, but he also wants the viewer to have their narrative and make their own fun out of it. And maybe the thing that keeps drawing us to Rausch is the mystery of the paintings, right? It is the strange. We have almost a Jesus crucifixion here, but it's really an animal with, like, or maybe a sculpture, but there's a head. We don't quite know what's going on. Everything feels a little bit nightmarish to me in a weird way, like you're stuck in a weird purgatory. And maybe that's how he feels. It seems like he has a pretty good life. I wouldn't mind selling out my solo shows before I paint the paintings, but that reminds me, I have a show on Saturday at the Oceanside Museum of Art from 6 to 8 p.m. if anyone wants to come. And the show will be up through June. And I'll do a huge yarn bomb project with it. And I'm going to ask people to donate yarn and make pom-poms. More to come on that. Okay, let's take a look at this really exciting deep space painting here. Look at what he's given us. Just, I mean, this is a flat canvas, but Tintoretto has given us, or a wall, the deepest space I've ever seen in a painting. That hallway seems to go on forever, doesn't it? And the figures in the corners, actually the corners of this painting are the most important part. The emptiest part is really in the center of the painting, and the most important parts are on the edges of the painting. Same with Rausch's painting on the right. So he's probably looking at the classical painters. He must have studied their work. Skill like this comes from practice and maybe some just innate born skill and ability to imagine and move these forms in space in a way from the imagination that you just, most people can't pull this off, right? Now, we need to consider that Rausch is painting every single one of his brush strokes, and Tintoretto at this point has a team of who knows how many people, including several of his children who then follow in his footsteps. They become his apprentice, and they end up painting his last large-scale painting. I feel like I've been talking forever. Okay, a few more minutes. Another deep, deep space in both of these. Look at the composition. Isn't that strange? They're almost set up exactly the same. And this one is a 2-panel, which it gets me excited because maybe he started with one and then he added the other panel. Wouldn't that be great if that's what happened? I don't know if that's what happened. And down here, we have this amazing Tintoretto painting. Again, we want to remind ourselves to move through the composition naturally. And this is sort of an oval, circular composition that we're getting in this one. And then to sort of try to read the story person by person through the narrative, knowing at the same time that I forgot what I was going to say, but this is obviously what we're looking at is bathing of the feet of, oh gosh, I can't remember. I used to have these all memorized, you guys. But they're bathing the feet of the saints. So what I read from this painting, again, the strongest sense I get from both of these paintings is the light. It's how they put the lights in to get you to understand where the important parts are of the painting. And they both use a limited palette in each painting. Do you see that these are reds, blues, yellows primarily? And up here, he's got yellows, greens, and reds primarily. So sort of interesting to me, the sense that they both use a limited palette. He chooses different palettes, but you can see that they're always about 4 or 5 colors, blacks, whites, or in this case, raw umber, and then a red and a green and a yellow and a white. So primary complementary colors happening in here. And down here is the last piece that Tintoretto is said to, that his apprentices actually painted this piece. Or helped paint it, and he painted it as well. So if you've gone to Italy and you've seen some of these, I would love to hear about it. Better yet, post a picture on the comment page. Take a moment to look at some of those. I don't know how to share my other screens, but take a look at those videos. There's some short videos on there and some great ones for Tintoretto. It was harder to find for Neo because most of them are in German. Anyway, if you want to chat in or make a comment about either of these artists, now is the time. And if you don't, I appreciate all of you being on here. There's, I think, 20 of you today, so that's very exciting. So I'm uploading all the videos from the past right now, and I'll get those up today, I promise. Really, in the next hour, I'm working on it. Okay, thank you. Have a great day.